In this video tutorial, I'm going to introduce you to our latest open source GitHub project, which is the Universal React Apollo registration system. And there's going to be a direct link in the description of this video. You can also find this project hosted on our organization page, so github.com/simpletut. But this, as I said, has a really impressive tech stack, and I want to go over that really quickly. So of course this has been written in NodeJS, and it is a server-side rendered React application. But of course we're using some really impressive libraries. So one of those is GraphQL, which is a query language that is designed to replace REST APIs. It prevents the over and under fetching of data because it allows you to specify exactly what information that you want to receive back per request. So we're going to cover that in a lot more detail in the duration of the project. But to actually incorporate that into our application, our React application, we're using something called React Apollo, an Apollo client. And this allows us to bring in GraphQL. Now, of course, to use GraphQL, we need to use MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database. And we're going to be using MLabs to actually provide that database to our application. And by the end of this video tutorial, I'm going to actually show you how to deploy this for free on Heroku. But although that actually kind of covers the main tech stack, we're using some really cool libraries on top of that. So one of those is JWT. You may be familiar with JSON Web Tokens. And this is going to allow us to actually securely log users in and out of our system. And those tokens also expire by default out the box. They expire in 1 hour, but you can easily customize that to any length of time from 1 hour to 2 weeks. It is completely up to your personal preference. And something else which is quite cool is CKEditor, which is the text as editor, the WYSIWYG editor that we're using for actually allowing users to customize their own personal About Me section on their profile pages. Now, before we actually get into the tutorial, I want to just explain the 3 sections that I'm going to be covering. So the first section, I actually want to take you through this, which is the demo of the system. So of course you have the Join Now page, the registration page, login. Obviously you have the user pages with the user profiles. You have account recovery, which actually resets their password and sends a customized email to the user. And of course we have all the pages which is behind the registration, such as the dashboard, edit your profile, update your account information, etc. And of course, you're going to be downloading all of this source code from our GitHub repository. And of course, the other thing which I really want to touch base with is if I actually go to the view source, you're going to see that this is completely server-side rendered, which is really important to any real-world application for SEO and of course the speed benefits. And something else is actually that out the box, this is completely responsive. I'm now going to give you a demonstration of the project itself via our online demo. And you can access this yourself if you head over to our GitHub project, and there'll be a link in the description of the video, and scroll down to our README section. You're going to find a direct link to our online demo, which you can access here. It's also a good time for me to mention that we've really documented this very well. As you can see, if you just scroll down a little bit, we've really got a huge amount of documentation for you to read, and if you have any questions, this might be a really good place for you to look. But I already have our demo open here in another tab, so I'm going to show you first of all the front-end pages. Now these are the pages that obviously are not restricted access to, so obviously the login page or the sign-up page, obviously the users need to register before they can actually log in. So before we get there, I'm going to show you the users page. Now this is a really interesting page because anybody that registers with your website is going to have their own profile page. Now, before I show you that, if I right-click on this page and go View Page Source, you're going to see that this is completely server-side rendered, which means the HTML is rendered on the server. And that's really important for things like search engine optimization, for when search engines like Google crawl your website. But it also helps with user experience, with things like page speed, etc. So that's really important for real-world applications, which of course this is. Now, obviously this is, as I said, this is the browse users page. So all the users that are currently registered at the moment, this is the demo. So we've just created 4 test accounts, and they'll appear here on this page. Now, if I click through into any one of these pages, so let's say that I click through into this user, then obviously this is their profile page. They have their own custom username. So obviously if you look at the URL, it's /profile/their username. So in this case, it's /Mark. And we've added, just for demo purposes, we've added some dummy text into the About Me section. Now, if I return to the users page and I click on a different user, so this person, you're going to see that they have a different URL. So of course, this is /rows. And of course, this is just a demo, so we've just added the same dummy text for each user. So I'm going to return now to the other pages. So some of the other pages that we have, for example, is the Join Now page. So this is the registration page, and I'm actually going to go ahead and register a new user. But what I want to do is I just want to show you the login page. So this is also obviously a really important page. We also have account recovery. And what I'd like to say here is that we've also built, which I will show you, a custom email template. And we've built that with a responsive email framework called MJML. Now, whenever a user signs up, their password and all the passwords for all of the accounts is using Bcrypt, which is one-way encryption. So it's really powerful. But the way that it works with password recovery is because we have one-way encryption, there's no way for us to tell the user what their password was. So we automatically generate a new password and replace it in the database. And we then email that password to the email associated with that account with an email, and that new password is included in that for them to log in with. Now, all of this is done for you out the box. We're just going to show you how to configure it. Now that I've done that, I just want to show you some other pages. We have, for example, the cookie policy page, the privacy policy, terms and conditions, the FAQ. All of this information and pages are completely customizable for you. And of course, you can add, remove pages as you want. You can restrict access to any page with basically one line of code. And again, I'm going to show you how to do all of this in just a few moments. So let's go ahead and sign up a new user. So I'm going to pause the video and just fill this form out. Okay, so I've just filled out this form to save some time. But before I actually go ahead and click on register, I just want to explain a few things. So we have quite a lot of validation going on this form. So that would be for 2 main fields, the email and the username field. Both of those need to be unique. If either one of those matches an existing account in our database, or both, then we will show an error message and ask the user to change one or the other. We also check that the password has a minimum of 8 characters, and of course we have password and password confirm, and the user will not be able to proceed until both of those match. So I filled out this information, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on register. Now when I do, I'm going to be automatically logged into my new account and redirected to our dashboard. Now from here, you can actually customize this dashboard as much as you want. We've just created some dummy information to kind of demonstrate what you can do and achieve. But this is basically the place where you can link to any pages that you might have restricted access to, or if you want to show some kind of infographic, you can literally do anything you want. Now, there's another few things that have changed when we logged in. So if you noticed up here in the header previously, we just had a link to our FAQ. Now that we're logged in, we have this little tab here, this section, which shows us our profile image and our name. So we can actually see that we're logged in here. We can also click on that. It will take us to our profile. And if we actually look at the main navigation, you're going to notice that it's suddenly changed. We've populated this navigation with a bunch of new links. And these links are the ones which are mainly pages that are restricted access to. There are a few that aren't. So the View My Profile page and the Users page, they're still, public-facing pages you don't need to be logged in for. But you can still click through into any one of those pages to see your account, for example. You're still in your account. You're still logged in. Now, let's explain this part a little bit more. So, of course, as I mentioned before, every user has their own profile. So obviously I have my profile now. But of course, this is just the default profile image. And I don't have any About Me information. So how do I change that? So if you go to Edit Profile, again, this is a page that is restricted access to. I'm going to, first of all, I want to change my profile image. I want to customize that. So for the profile image, I'm going to click on Choose File. And I have this image here that I want to use. So I'm going to select that and click on Open. And then I'm going to upload it. And a few things happen. So down here, you're going to notice that we have these really nice notifications. So this just lets me know that I've successfully saved my new profile image. That'll eventually fade away. If I look over at this section here, you're going to see in the header that obviously I've now got my new profile image displaying. And also if I go through into the users section, you're going to see that my new profile image is displaying for me. And also if I go to view my personal profile by clicking on this link or this here itself, that my new profile image is displaying as it should. Now what about my About Me information? Because really I need some information there too. So I'm going to come back on Edit Profile. And this is where we have our CKEditor. So this is a really rich text editor that allows the users to really customize their profile. So for now I'm just going to add some info about me. And of course I can play with this a bit more. I could make the info bold. I could put about as an italic. I could do anything I want. I could change the style of the whole thing if I wanted to. I can do anything I want. I could even look at the source code. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to click on Save Changes. Again, I get my nice notification down here. That's faded away. And I can come back to my profile. And again, now I can see that information that I just saved. So my profile is we're building it up. We're adding more information to it by the second. That's great. So what about some of the other features? So we have Update Account. So if I click on this, again, I can update my personal account information. So first of all, I can see my account. The account is the account holder. So that's my name, my username, and my current email. If I want to change that email for whatever reason, I can do that by just entering a new email here and clicking on Update. And if I want to change my password for whatever reason, I can do that too. Now, I don't think I need to do that for this tutorial, but it's important that you know that these functions and features exist. And of course, I can also log out. But one thing that I want to do is show you the tokens. So we're using JSON Web Tokens. And of course, I have a really cool Google Chrome extension called Edit This Cookie. And this is a really cool tool because it allows me to see the cookies that are stored in my browser for any website that I'm currently on. And you're going to see this one cookie that we're using in this application, which is just called token. Now this is our JSON Web Token. Okay, so it might not make too much sense to you, but that is what we're using to log users in and out with. And this is verified on the server. It's what expires. And if I log out, as I'm doing now, you're going to see my window resets. I no longer see those pages which are restricted access to. I don't see my profile image here, but I can also look in this cookie extension and that cookie is removed. So whenever that's not there, or if it's expired, basically it logs you out. And that's really, really cool. It's a really important feature. And something else which I really want to cover is that this is fully responsive. So if I just makes the browser a little bit smaller to replicate a mobile device or tablet, you're going to see that we get a completely different layout. We get a mobile menu, and it really works the same, but it's really important that you understand this is also fully responsive out the box. Okay, I'm now going to show you how to clone the project to your computer, start working with the files, developing, familiarize you with the project architecture, and I'm then going to show you how to prepare that for production and deploy it on Heroku. Now, before we can actually do that, I need to make sure that you have a few things installed on your computer so that you can actually work with and run the files that we need to. The first one is going to be NodeJS, and again, you may have some of this stuff already installed, especially if you are familiar with React, etc. Now, if you install Node, it's going to come with a package manager called npm. We're going to be using that to manage our dependencies. In fact, I also recommend, on top of that, downloading Yarn. This is an alternative to npm as a package manager. It's a little bit more reliable, and it is my preference, and I do recommend it. But again, this one's optional. And we are going to need Git command line tools. This is just going to make our lives a little bit easier when we're working with Git, and allow us to kind of use terminal or CMD. And again, it's just going to make our lives a lot easier. And finally, we're going to be using MLabs. This is where we're going to actually host our database, and actually we're going to use this to connect to our application, both on dev and on live, to our database. So you're going to need to go to mlab.com, and again, there'll be a link in the GitHub repository. You can go to the website. I'll post a link in the description of the video. You're going to need to sign up to create an account, which of course is completely free, or log into an existing account. So let's go back to our GitHub page, and we're going to, first of all, we're going to clone the project to our computer. Now, one thing I'd like to encourage you guys to do is to fork the project. So when you fork the project, you're going to need to sign up to github.com and create your own account, or again, log into an existing one. But when you have your own account, it will allow you to fork the project. And what that's going to do is it's going to clone the entire repository onto your own account. And that's going to allow you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and that is to push your work to the repository on your account. And that's going to be very helpful if you're not familiar with Git. It's a versioning tool, so every time that you commit work, you're going to be able to keep track of all the changes that you've made. And I really recommend that you do that. The other thing is, I'd really like to ask you guys to start the project and actually commit to watching the project too. You can do that by logging into your account and just clicking on star and watch up here at the top. And by starring it, you're going to help us to just keep on maintaining the project. And by watching it, you're going to get updates every time that we do make a change. So let's just get back to the tutorial now, assuming that you've done all of those things. And wherever you want to actually store the project, so for me, I'm going to do it on desktop. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this my new project. And the first step is to actually go on GitHub to wherever you've forked a project and just get the clone URL. You can do that really easily by just clicking on this. And then you need to actually open up your terminal, or if you're on Windows, it'll be slightly different. You'll just need to open up your CMD, and you need to navigate inside of the folder that we just created that you want to clone your project to. So I'm going to say CD, which stands for change directory, and I'm going to go inside the folder. Now on Mac, you can just drag the folder into terminal and click on return. On Windows, it might be slightly different, but you just need to navigate inside of this folder here. So you're basically inside of the folder within your terminal window. And then you just need to type in the following command, which is git clone, and then paste the URL that we just took from the GitHub website and click on return. The minute that you do that, the entire project is going to be cloned to our folder, our project folder. Now we need to navigate inside of that folder, because if I use a list command within my terminal window, which is ls, you're going to see that we're inside of our project folder, but when we cloned it, we cloned the entire project, but it kind of cloned it inside of a subfolder. So we need to be inside of our main directory. So we need to navigate inside of this. So all I'm going to do again is just cd, and I'm going to navigate inside of that folder that we just cloned. And if I now do a list command, you're going to see that I get all of the files that I would expect to see inside of my project folder. So again, if I click inside of that, I'm inside my folder within terminal. That's really important. Now, the next thing that we need to do is install all of the dependencies that I mentioned we needed npm or yarn for. So to do that, it's really easy. Just go yarn install, and that's going to install all of the dependencies. Now, this is going to take a while because it literally has to download and install all of them. But that's going to depend on your internet connection. So I'm just going to pause the video and return once that's done. Okay, so that's done. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go over to my chosen text editor. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm going to be using VS Code. This is a free text editor, but you can use any one that you want. Now, as a professional front-end web developer, I can tell you that this is becoming very, very popular and definitely is very highly recommended. Now, all you need to do is just drag your project folder or open up our project within that text editor so we can see the files. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And now there's a few configuration steps that we need to take before we can actually run or build our project. So the first one is this variables.env file, which is in the root of our project folder. Now, there are a few settings. So for example, we need to connect to the database. So we obviously need to create a database. It's going to store all of our information. We're going to query that database whenever we need to log in a user, fetch a user's information, whatever. We need to obviously connect with the database. So we need to connect our application with our remote database on MLab. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So I'm going to return over to my web browser, and I'm going to go to mlab.com. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to need to sign up or log in. I'm going to log into my account. Okay, so when you're actually logged in, you're going to be able to create a new database. So just click on Create New. Once you've done that, you're going to be able to select which provider you want to use, whether it's Microsoft Azure, Google, or Amazon Web Services. For now, I'm going to use Amazon, and I'm going to select on Sandbox, which is the free option. And I recommend you just following along using the same options because it's going to make sure everything is exactly the same. So let's do that. Click on Continue down here. And then it's going to ask me to select the region that's nearest me, whether you're in the US or Europe. I'm going to select Europe, and then just click on Continue. And again, it's going to want you to just create a database name. I'm just going to enter test, or I'm just going to enter demo. And then I'm going to click on Continue again. And then it's just going to show me all of my options that I selected. Obviously, I've selected free, so this isn't going to cost me or you anything. Just submit the order. And that's going to take a few seconds to set up. Initially, it's going to say that it's in progress here. It's just taking a few seconds. Once that's done, we're going to be able to proceed. Okay, so it just finished. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this demo. That's the database that we just created. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I need to add a user with certain permissions to this database. So I'm going to click on Users, and then I'm going to go to Add Database User. And I'm just going to give this username, test user, and I'm going to enter a custom password. So for now, let's just do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And okay, it needs to be a little bit more complex. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a capital A. Does that work? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a capital A for the password. So again, this is just mock information. The second this tutorial is finished, I'm going to delete this entire database. I recommend when you're doing this, you use a much more secure password, but this is just for me to show you how to set this up. Okay, so just go ahead and click on Create. I'd just like to say, make sure that you do not check make read only. This should not be checked because you need write permissions. So let's go ahead and click on Create. And that's just going to go ahead and add the user to our database, which you can see. Okay, so I mentioned we need a connection string. So obviously that's right here. So I just have to scroll up, and this one here says to connect using a driver via the standard MongoDB URL. This is it. This is our connection string. So just highlight that, right click, copy. Okay, so we need to come back to our text editor where we have this variable here for DB connection string. And we just need to paste that string in here. That's all you need to do. Now, there's a few things you need to do. So this is our connection string, and here you're going to see there's an area for DB user and an area for DB password. That's the user we just created. So the user is going to be test user, and the password, as I told you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a capital A. That was the password that I created. Again, this is not secure, so I recommend whatever you create is much more secure than that. Now, the next thing that we need to think about is JSON Web Tokens. So we use a JSON JWT. We have a secret key here. And of course, this is a open source project which could have millions of people using it. So we recommend that each user customizes their JSON Web Token secret. Again, this is in the same variables.env file. So again, let's just delete this key and enter a completely random string of numbers and characters. So I'm literally just going to, I don't know, create a random key. Maybe here I'll put a H, S, F, I don't know, anything. Literally, this should be a completely random string of numbers and letters, okay? And all of this information is just creating variables that are going to be used within our project, okay? So that's that. Then we have the final step, which is NodeMailer. Now, NodeMailer is used basically for sending emails. Okay, so we do this when we reset a user's password. So every time that a user chooses to change their reset their password, we use Bcrypt password encryption, which is one-way encryption, which is really secure, but it means that if a user wants to reset their password or recover it, there's no way of us recovering their existing password. We have to generate a new password, save that to their account, and then email their new password to the account, the email associated with their account. Now, NodeMailer is a really cool package or library that allows us to actually handle on a Node server the sending of an email. But we need to configure it first. You can do that with a private mail server, or you can use it with something free like Gmail. And just show you that if you scroll down on our README file to our table of contents, and you scroll through, we have a section devoted to setting up your mail server. And this will actually go through setting up this with Gmail or your own custom mail server. Now, for security reasons, I'm not going to configure this here, but I will do this in the background. All you need to do is enter your host, your user, your username, and your password, and the from email. And this is going to be used, as I said, just to process sending those emails. If you do not know what this information is, then just go to your provider, whether it is your web host or whatever provider that you're using. If you're using Gmail, then just follow along just create a Gmail account and just follow along with our documentation to set that up. But all you have to do effectively is enter your username and password and your from email. Now your from email is just the from address that will appear when the user gets their email. So usually it's like a no reply at yourdomain.com or at gmail.com. That's all you need to do. Okay, so now that we've configured those settings, we're ready to run a build. So I'm going to return to my terminal window. I'm going to clear that down. And all we need to write in here is yarn run build. And that's going to run our first build. And again, this may take a few seconds, so I'm just going to pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, so that's it. It's run the build. So we can then actually run our application. So to do that, we'll just do yarn run dev. Click on return. And again, it may take a few seconds just to set that up. We'll then get a notification. We'll get two notifications. The first one is that it's running on port 3000. The second is that it connected to our database successfully. So all we need to do is go over to our web browser and just go to localhost 3000, click on return, and you're going to come over, and this is the system running on your machine, on your computer. So obviously there are no users. This is the new database that we created, and that's it. It's running on your machine. So if I wanted to actually test this out, let's create a new user. So let's say Joe Blogs and register. That's it. Okay, so now that we have this running on our machine, I think this would be a really good opportunity for me to show you around the project architecture and kind of introduce you to where everything is or can be found. So I've already told you about the variables.env file. There is another configuration file, and that file is the webconfig.json. And this is the only other configuration file that you need to know about. And this is going to be used whenever you want to basically deploy the application online, or when you want to work on it in your local development environment. The reason is that you need to, we're using Webpack to actually compile the code and output our build. Now, assets and things like that are all prefixed with absolute URLs, which means that the site URL that is in this configuration file will be prefixing all of our assets within our outputted code. So whenever you want to work on this locally, you need to make sure that this is set to localhost 3000. And whenever you want to deploy this, you're going to need to change this to your live URL. That's all you have to do. Again, I'm going to explain this when I actually show you how to deploy this for free on Heroku. Right now, you don't need to worry about that. The next thing is the environment. This is an environment variable that is used by Webpack, and basically it changes the way that Webpack will output your code, basically minifying certain things and stuff like that. So to kind of show you what I mean, if I go into Google Chrome, this is our system running on localhost 3000, and this is the exact same thing running on the online demo. Now I have a really cool Chrome extension which is called React Tools. It's from Facebook. Obviously React was created by Facebook, and this Chrome extension just tells you that obviously this is the live demo, and if you check React DevTools, it is telling me that I am running a production build of React. That's great. It's live. It should be. If we go back over to our local host, this is what we're running. And again, remember, this is running this code, and this is set to development. And we check the DevTools. It is telling us that we are running a development build of React. So that is the difference. Whenever you want to deploy this on live, make sure this is set to production, and whenever you're working locally, it should be on development. Okay, so we also have the build directory. This is generated every time that you run a build. what is outputted in these files is determined by Webpack, and we have two Webpack files in the root directory. One is for client, one is for server. The result of that is that we actually output two bundles. So as you can see, we have a server bundle, and in the public folder, we have a client bundle. There are some differences between these two files. So for example, if you look at the configuration files in Webpack, we're actually telling the server Webpack file to exclude all of the node modules. So that's going to be a much smaller file. But generally, the client bundle will not include things like your secret key, things which are sensitive. As I said, the server bundle is not publicly accessible, which is very important. Additionally, in the public directory, you have all of your assets like CSS and graphics, etc. Now, another important file to mention is the server.js file. This is where we configure our node server. This handles things like connecting to the database, all of the things that you would expect, server-side rendering, etc. And node mailer, things like that. We also have our source directory where we have all of our source code. And obviously we have a folder for user uploads. In here we upload our profile images. And this is important because it's sitting outside of the build directory. That means that whenever you run a build, you're not going to be overwriting your images. Additionally, in our source folder, we have a tests folder. This is where we have all of our unit tests. And that brings me to the next steps of this tutorial. I'm going to be showing you guys how I think it would be a good idea to do a mini project of creating a page, showing you how to include that in the navigation, setting up the route, and then maybe even restricting access to that page. Then I want to show you how to run the unit tests, and then we're going to go on to the final stage of actually deploying this on Heroku. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to create a new page, and I want to add a link to it on the main navigation. So to do that, I need to go into my source folder, and the first thing I want to do is go into the pages directory. Inside of here, I have my a few files which are important. So I have an auth folder. This is where all of the pages sit for like the sign-in page, the edit profile, etc. Then we have outside of that our pages like users or user, dashboard. Just going over a few files here, we have app.js, which is where we define all of our routes. This is our client.js, where we define our client. Obviously, if you're familiar with GraphQL and Apollo client, we have our resolvers, our schema. We have a folder for our user model. This is where we define our database, layouts, header components. Now, I don't want to go into all of these files. I think this is something that you would sit down with and kind of go through. But what I want to do is I just want to create a new page. So what I'm going to do is in the pages folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it example.js. And in here, I have to define a new class. So to do that, I need to import React from React. And then I need to create a class. So I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it example. And then it needs to extend React component. We need to have a render method where we return something. I'm going to return a div, and in that div we're just going to have a h1 which says my example page, and we're just going to have a simple p tag where we just say something like my content. And then down here we just need to export default example. That's our class that we're exporting. So we've created our page. All we need to do now is actually set up our route. So I've created my page, and all I need to do now is actually go ahead and create the route for this. So I need to link this page with my application. To do that, I need to go to app.js, and I need to, first of all, I need to import that page. So I'm going to import the page. So the class is called example from, and I just need to import that file. So that's in pages example. And then I need to scroll down and add a route. So these are all my routes. Just below the FAQ, I'm just going to copy and paste it to save time. The URL I want is going to be /example, so I'm going to enter that for the path. And then the component that I want to render for it is the class I just imported, which is example. I'm already passing props. Now the one thing I want to mention is that you'll notice that we have wrapped that component in something called a main layout. So the layout is actually, you can have multiple layouts for your application. Your layouts are actually defined in a layouts file. So if I expand layouts, you'll notice in here we have a main layout.js, and you can build any layout you want, and wherever you want the routes to render, you just call the children on your props object. So if you look at the web browser, everything you see around the browser is the layout component, and this window here, this section here where you see the login actual kind of component, the box for the login window, that is the login route itself. That's the login component. Everything else, like the side menu, the header, the footer, that's part of the layout component. So there's your sidebar, your header, and your footer, and then there's your actual component. That's what your route is. So hopefully that's kind of makes sense. If it doesn't, then maybe just play around with the code, and I'm sure it will make sense eventually. But if you follow along with creating that route here, so for /example and adding your class in here, we can save that file and come back over to our browser and just type in directly /example, and there you go. There's your component. That's the page that we just created. So you'll notice, again, to kind of explain the layout, we come back to our example.js. All we have is my example page and my content, but if you look at the browser, we have our sidebar, our header, that's coming from the layout. So hopefully that explains it too. Another really important thing is that if I right-click View Page Source and I do a search for H1, there you can see there's my content from the page. So with absolutely zero effort, this is also being server rendered, which is also really important. Okay, so we've created a route. All we need to do now is actually add a link into our navigation. So one of the great things about React is that the code is very modular, so everything has its own component. So all we need to do now is go into that component, which we can easily do by going into components and finding sidebar.js. And this is where all of our code lives for our sidebar. And in here we have two unordered lists for our main navigation, and it's wrapped in two conditional statements. And it's basically checking either or if the user is logged in. Now for the navigation, when the user is not logged in, I want to add a link to that page. Okay, so I'm just going to literally save some time. I'm going to copy one of the list items. I'm not going to worry about the font icon. We're using Font Awesome, by the way. And I'm just going to add a link just as example. And it's just literally an anchor tag. So we just need to say we want to go to /example. Now if I save that file, come back to my browser, refresh it, you're going to see we now have a link to example. So I could click away and then I could come back and I can see it. Now there's one thing which I'm not happy about on my route is that I don't have a custom page title. So if you go somewhere like users, we have a custom page title, which is users React Starter Kit. For example, we don't have that. So to fix that, we've already got the correct code in place to do it. We just need to basically implement it into our page component. So back in example.js, we need to import our library. So we need to import from, it's from React Helmet, and we want to import Helmet. And what we need to do is we need to create a new method above our render method. We're going to call it head, and in here we need to return something, and we are going to return helmet, and inside of helmet we're going to have a title tag. You can put anything you want. I'm going to say example title, and all we need to do inside of our div is call that method. So we'll just say this.head and call that function. So if I now come back to the browser and I refresh the page, you can see we have our page title. And if I right click view page source, you're going to see it's also server rendered. So all of this is really, really important. It's really easy to do. Now, what if I want to restrict access to this page? That's something that's really important, and I'm sure it's something very common you're going to want to do in your project. All you need to do is go into app.js where you define that route, because we need to pass some additional props. We need to pass through the user session, so when the user is actually logged in, their session. So we need to pass through session as props. So you can just literally copy the code I'm writing on the example route. And all of this is kind of done for you. If you notice up here, we are already destructuring the object. We're getting session and we're actually passing that through to our page component. Once we have that, we can return to our example.js, so our page component. And we need to, first of all, we need to use a higher order component. So we already have higher order components, and we have a folder which is HOC, since we're higher order component. And inside we have two files. One is with auth and one is with session. This with auth file is going to allow us to restrict access. So we need to import that. So we're going to import with auth from with auth. So it's up one higher component with auth. And then all you need to do is come down here to where we export our class, and we need to wrap example in with auth, but we need to pass through this session that we just the user session. Okay, so the way that you do that is session, session, it's conditional function, so session, and the object on that is get current user. Now you can just literally copy out what I've written. You could also go to another page, like for example dashboard, which has already got restricted access, and you can actually just copy the code out literally like that. Okay, so again, if I come back to the browser and I refresh the page, I'm taken to login. So it's asking me to actually log in now. So there's one last step, because I just want to drive home. If I try to get to that route, so /example does not allow me. I have to be logged in to access that route now. There's one other thing, that's on the navigation. I want to only show the route if the user is logged in and has permission to access it. So to do that, I just come back to my component, sidebar.js, and as I said before, there's two different lists. I'm going to take it from the list that's shown on unauthenticated users, and I'm going to put it just above logout on the authenticated list. I'm going to refresh the page. It's gone. If I log into the test account I created, joeemail.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, log in, and again, you'll see that link is now available to me, and I can click around, come back to it, and that looks really good, right? And I can log out, and that's it. So what I've actually done is I've shown you how to, work with this project and build some more pages, restrict access, which is really important. But I think one thing that's really going to be key is for you to just sit down with this and play with it yourself. Now, there's one other thing that I want to do, and I want to show you how to run the unit tests. And this is really, really important, because unit tests are important. But again, they're completely optional. And all unit tests do is it's just a way of testing certain things are working, I guess. So in our application, we have a command, which is yarn run test. And if you run that command, it's going to literally run all of the unit tests. And as you can see, everything is passing. Now, these are the actual unit tests which are set up on the our GitHub repo. So if we go back up to the project, top of the project, you're going to see the build is passing. We're using something called Travis CI. And every time that we push something up here, it runs the tests and makes sure that everything passes. So you can see that the benefits of having proper unit tests. And basically, it just tests that everything renders without errors. And it's a very useful thing to be able to run before you do a go live, before you commit work. You know, if you're working on a team project, they're very useful. If you go into the industry, it's something that you're gonna run into quite a bit. But again, this is not really a tutorial on unit tests or writing out that kind of code, but it is, maybe it's something that you can actually look at and maybe get some ideas from. These are our tests, and again, we are using Jest, which is again a testing framework from Facebook. Coincidence, Facebook created React, so it's a pretty good option. But again, we're covering that in our documentation as well. If you come down here somewhere, there is some information on, there you go, unit tests, if you want more information on that. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to actually upload this and deploy it to a live URL. We want to put this online. So to do that, we're going to be using a service called Heroku, which is a really, really great place for Node.js apps and actually pretty much everything. This is going to be completely free, so all you need to do is go to heroku.com and you need to either sign up or log into your account. So I'm just going to go ahead and log into my account. This is a good moment for me to probably mention that you are going to need to install the Heroku command line CLI. You can do that very easily. Just do a Google search for Heroku command line and just go ahead and install that on your machine. Once you have done it, just log into your Heroku account and select the option to create a new app. You'll be on this page, so all you need to do is go ahead and enter a name for your app. Once you've done that, you can just select the region that's closest to you, so for example, Europe. And then all you need to do is just say create app. That's going to go ahead and do that for you, and then you can just scroll down, and actually you can click on this, which is going to open up the app for you. So this is going to be your URL. So I'm going to copy that because we're going to need that later, but this is where our app is going to appear when we are actually uploading this online. So we need to come back now to Heroku, and if we scroll down, you're going to see when you're under the deploy options that it gives you a few options. So this is how you can basically upload your project online. So let's just return for a second to our application, our text editor. There is one or two configuration settings that we need to set. So the first one is in our JSON config file. So this is where I said that we need to make sure whenever we deploy this, we need to make sure that the site URL is set to our domain, and it should not have a trailing /. The other thing which I mentioned previously is that we need to make sure from development we switch that over to production because we're going live. Another really important thing to understand is that we have a git ignore file, which is going to ignore node modules. It's going to ignore all of our build. And this is really important as well because it's just good practice. You should never be uploading your build to your server, okay? If you look at the package JSON for Heroku, we have an additional script, which is Heroku post build. And this is actually going to mean that when we actually upload our files to Heroku, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check for package JSON. It's going to install the dependencies. Then it's going to check if this script exists, which is Heroku post build. This is going to run a build on the server, and then it's going to execute our prop file, which is already in the application for you. It's just going to basically run our server build to launch our application, which is super easy, right? So now that you've configured your web config JSON file, we're actually ready to come back over to terminal, and we need to follow the commands. So if I come back over to Heroku, it's first of all, it's telling me to log in. If you enter that command, so Heroku login, into your terminal, it's just going to prompt you to log into your account within terminal and log you in within your terminal window. I've already done that, so I don't need to. But what I do need to do is basically write out a few Git commands. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do git status, and that's going to show me all the files that I need that are currently in my directory that are not committed. So I need to then say git add all, and then if I come back to git status again, okay, so everything is now included. That's great. So I'm going to do git commit -m with a message. I'm going to call it our initial commit. And then if I do git status, it should just tell me it's clean and it's ready to go. So what I now need to do is come back and we need to add our remote repository. So I just copied that line and I just paste it here. And there you go. We've set our remote Heroku app. So all we need to now do is just say git push Heroku master and click on return. The second that we do that, it's going to automatically upload all of our files, it's going to install our packages, and it's going to run the build. Okay, so as you can see, that has now finished. So I'm going to come back over to my web browser, and this is the domain that we just created. I'm going to refresh it, and immediately there you go. There is our app up and running. And interestingly, if I log into my account, so let's go ahead and do that. So it's still the same database. So it's joe@email.com, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and log in. You're going to see that that page that we created and added, which is example, if I click on it, there you go. And this is on the live site. Now there's one thing that I really want to show you because I think it's really cool. That I haven't shown you yet, and that is the ability to reset your password. So I'm going to go over to account recovery, and I'm going to enter in an email for another account that I just created, and I want to show you the password reset email that we're creating. Okay, so I've just submitted the request to reset my password, and as you can see, this is the email I just received. I wanted to show you the custom email template that we've built using the MJML responsive framework. Again, this is not anything that you ever have to touch, but it's something that is really cool and I want you to know about. So this is the password that's been generated, and I can literally just copy and paste this and log into my account again. Now again, I just want to show you that this is how advanced the application is. We're using so many really cool things. This is the MJML framework. Again, maybe I'll post a link in the description. If not, you can just do a search on Google. It's mjml.io. And this is the framework which you can get into. And even if it's not related to the registration system, if you want to create responsive email templates, I really recommend that you look into this framework. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you guys for following along with this video tutorial. Again, there's going to be a link in the description of this video to our GitHub project page where you can get access to the code. I'd also like to just encourage you guys to start our project. Again, it's just going to help us to keep on maintaining it and developing new features. If you do have any feature requests or questions about the project, then do leave a comment. Please rate and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll do our best to contact you. Another thing that I love to encourage you guys to do is to visit our official GitHub page for our organization, which is github.com/simpletut. And here you'll be able to find a number of other projects and more projects as we create more. But one of the others is called React Starter Kit. This is a completely different starter kit that's actually built using React and Redux. So again, different projects require different tech stacks. This is a slightly different tech stack. Again, if you're interested in learning more about React, server-side rendering, Redux, GraphQL, please, that's another aspect of these starter kits or the user registration system, is that you can use them to kind of understand how things kind of come together and kind of examine the code in that way. I'd also like to encourage you to visit our official website, which is simpletut.com, where you'll be able to browse our full range of tutorials. We do have a number of other tutorials on React, but we also cover a range of other topics. And finally, I'd really like to encourage you to visit our official Facebook page, which is facebook.com/simpletut. We'll be posting all of our updates here